Hello again, YouTube. Welcome back for another Tim Cain reaction. This one is on good lessons from a bad teacher. And as you all know, I'm a pretty bad teacher, but I'd like to become better. Maybe Tim can help teach me.
Hi everyone, it's me, Tim.
Hi, Tim.
Today I want to talk about
Welcome
good
back.
lessons from a bad
By the way, I love that you can hear his dog snoring in the background every time.
teacher.
Yeah.
This is something that I talked about really briefly almost a year ago in a video called School versus Self-Taught, where I was talking about the pros.
Actually, Tim is gay, so it's definitely not his wife. I don't think it's his boyfriend. It is definitely his dog.
And cons of learning at a university versus self-teaching, teaching.
Yeah, I think we watched that one. By the way, I am self-taught, so I've never been to college. In fact, I didn't even finish high school, and I can say that there were some really big benefits to learning on my own. Number one, you can set your own curriculum, so you can find the things that really interest you and just follow those at your own pace, and you don't really have any, homework or tests to do. But at the same time, you also don't have the motivation that I think comes from, or maybe not motivation, but the rigidity, the structure that comes with somebody setting your agenda, saying at the end of this semester, you will have accomplished this, and I'm going to step you through that process. Having to do it on your own can be like shooting in the dark, and sometimes you might venture down pathways that don't lead anywhere or that don't help you to become better. I kind of prefer that, but just in some cases, I think that college is better in that way, and for networking. There are also things you might overlook or not know what to look for if you learn it. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, because you don't have anybody to teach you, to guide you. Although I think that now with YouTube videos and online tutorials becoming more prevalent than they were like 10 years ago when I was trying to get into game dev, it's a bit easier than it was, but also you still have that, I don't know which direction to aim in. I don't know what to do. I don't know, should I go to game jams? Should I buy a tutorial course? Should I follow some big YouTube tutorial or something? Who knows? There's a lot of uncertainty.
And also, I apologize. The dog is snoring up a storm. Um,
We heard.
in that video,
Yeah.
I talked about an experience I had with a really bad teacher my first year of engineering school, my undergraduate degree. I have a link below, not only to the video, but to the time marker where I start talking about that. Because I want to talk about it in more detail so you can really understand how bad it was. And then I want to tell you the lessons I walked away from that with.
Yeah.
And sort of how I think this can help you approach things that happen to you that aren't the best thing in the world, but you can take away something good from it. So let's dive into this a little in more detail. I actually wrote notes because this was, first of all, I have a lot of notes for this, and I even talk about my notes, and maybe this is the origin of my note taking. But I didn't want to skip anything because it kind of, there's not only a couple sidebars I have to do, but there's an epilogue. So I started in engineering school in the fall of 1983. I was in a scholar program. This was at University of Virginia Engineering School. It was called the Rodman Scholars. Now, this scholarship program had no money attached to it. Zippo. I didn't get a thing for doing it.
Like, we'd like to give you a scholarship for this school. Oh, great. What do I get? What do you want? We don't have anything to give you. Have fun with your scholarship. Go to school. So I don't know what the point is. I mean, maybe they would give you some like preferential treatment. I don't know. What's the point of a scholarship if you don't get any money for it? Kind of weird.
It was supposed to be like this prestigious thing, and I got put in some, prestigious classes.
Oh, okay.
Turns out those classes were really just the same classes that other non-scholars got. The only difference was everyone in that class was a Rodman scholar, which
That's
this
weird.
is important later because some of these classes taught on a curve, which meant instead of me being in a class with just random engineering students,
Yeah.
I was in a class with all of the students who were picked to be the best of the incoming high school students.
So it's like an advanced placement kind of class, right? Where you learn the same things, but you learn it at maybe a harsher curve. Maybe you go in more depth into some things. It's kind of how I see it as like an AP class. Maybe some of you guys had that in your in your schools? I know in the US we had like AP classes, which were advanced placement. So they would take some of the best students, or you had to qualify with a certain grade to get into those, and they often taught more or at a harsher curve than the ones that weren't advanced placement. I wasn't a big fan of those classes. More homework
Coming into the
that
University
I
of
didn't
Virginia
do.
Engineering School that year. So that's important later.
Yeah,
Now let me quickly talk about there were these AP tests you took
AP,
in high
advanced
school
placement.
after
Yep.
SATs. If you were in some AP classes, you could then take these AP tests. And I took a few. And at UVA, depending on how well you did, you could either skip a class or skip a whole year. For example, I got a 5 in my AP biology class because one of the best teachers I ever had in my entire scholastic career, Mrs. Seftis at Grofton High School,
Shout out.
was an excellent biology teacher. She taught us so well that the biology test was a mixture of multiple choice and essay, and I felt completely prepared. There was nothing they asked that I didn't go, yep, Mrs. Seftis covered that in detail, and I understood it because I asked a lot of questions and she answered them all great. Got a 5 in that. No first year science at engineering school for me.
You know, I have to stop there because I hated school, right? I dropped out of high school. I didn't complete it. When people ask me for my education, I actually just, I can't put anything because usually they say high school or GED equivalent as minimum. I don't even have that. I love learning. I really love learning. I love knowledge. And I did really well in classes where the teachers were good, and I did really poorly in the classes where the teachers were shit. And I think that that does have an impact on kids' desires and willingness and motivation to learn, is whether or not their teacher is actually just good at teaching. You know, I was advanced placed in math 2 years ahead of my grade level for most of my math kid career. I don't know how do I word this? In most of my time in school, I was placed 1 or 2 years above in math, except for when I got to high school and I had a teacher in one of these AP classes who was so jack shit at teaching math that I actually fell behind in math and I had to take a catch-up class. Which, to be fair, the catch-up class teacher was so good that he made me love math again. To this day, I hate chemistry because of that teacher. Dude, same. I had a horrible chemistry teacher who forced us to take notes in a way that I didn't learn very well from. And so I used a note-taking method that my history teacher, my US history teacher, had taught us that I felt more comfortable with. So she would give me F's in she would grade our note-taking. She gave me an F in note-taking, and I refused to do it her way. I did it my way that I felt more comfortable with, and I flunked out of that class. I think that good teachers are very underrated, but really good teachers are very memorable. My math teacher that helped me, Mr. Purdy, shout out if he's still alive and still doing what he's doing, because he would sit down. He was so good at what he did at teaching and helping that before grading the night's homework, he would first say, did anybody have any questions about last night's homework? Did anybody not complete any of the questions? Was there any confusion? And he would spend the entire class, or however long was needed, to go through everybody's questions. He'd say, hey, Mr. Purdy, yeah, I didn't know how to do question number 10 on the assignment. And he would go up to the blackboard and he would walk through it. And then you could copy it down onto your homework before turning it in. So there was literally zero excuse to get anything other than an A in that class. And honestly, I like that. Additionally, you know, when, I don't know if you see like math textbooks. Let me pull up a page from a math textbook. Where's a good page? High school. Fuck, where's the interior of one? Okay, maybe I can kind of see it here. So you see how there are multiple questions here? 30, 31, 32, 33. A lot of teachers would just assign an entire chapter. He would pick 1 or 2 questions from each section so that you understood the purpose of that, so that you weren't being given like 50 questions of math homework to do at night. You were given more like 15, so that you understood the process of each section well. And then he would, you know, of course you had to show your work. He did something that was pretty controversial for, I think, a lot of teachers, which was he would take He would take a notebook page, not a. He would take a notebook page like this, okay, and he would say, "Your goal for homework is to take it and to split up the page into 4 pieces, and there was one question for each section, and you had to show your work." And that was how the pages were all set up. It wasn't about doing, writing it here or writing it on some printed piece of paper. No, it was we use notebook pages and you show the work in here. Honestly, I loved it. I actually loved it. I fell back in love with doing math. It was so good. He was so helpful. I will infinitely remember his name. And every kid gets to vote like who they think was the best teacher that they had that year. I wrote his name in because he actually helped. He actually taught. And it was a great memory I have. So yeah, shout out to good teachers. You had some teachers that did that, would make us do all of them. So that was what made me hate math, was that teacher that just said, "Hey, do this chapter in your homework." Do the entire chapter. He wouldn't teach it. He would just say, "Do this next chapter, read the text and do all the questions." And then he would sit at his fucking computer and do some basketball bullshit because he was also the coach for the basketball team. And you could clearly tell that he cared more about that. He actually made me so depressed to be in his class that at one point I was honestly just depressed in high school at that point. But I hated his class so much that he openly asked me in front of the entire class, it was very embarrassing, whether or not I was on drugs. He said, "Joey, are you on drugs right now?" It's like, dude, I'm out. I just walked out of the class. What a fucking asshole. He told him yes, dude. I kind of wish that I was on drugs to be in his class because that's how boring and depressing it was. And it felt weird too because I was in advanced placement, so I was with people 1 grade above me. I didn't know anybody in that class. I didn't have any friends there, except for one person, a girl who was actually my brother's friend, and she also hung out with me too. Then in that case, because she was just 1 year ahead, and she remembers that too. She remembers that day, and she was shocked that teacher would have the balls to ask that to me. I don't know. Dude, fuck that guy. I don't remember his name. I don't want to remember his name. Fuck him. Mr. Purdy, though, he's a real G. Shout out to Mr. Purdy.
But I didn't get a 5 in math. I got a 4 in AP Calculus, I think it was called. So I got to skip the first semester's class and go directly into what would have been the second semester class. But I got it taught my first semester. Yeah. So which means, this is important too, I was in a class that's normally taught the second semester, but it was being taught the first semester by everybody who'd gotten a 4, who got to skip the first one. This math teacher was rough. That's the nicest thing I can say. The worst thing I can say, she was the worst teacher I ever had in my entire scholastic career. And I say that definitively and with no regret. She was terrible in her teaching method. She was terrible in her grading method. She was terrible in her overall attitude. And I remember, I don't even care to think about her a lot. So I'm going to go into detail here. And this is one of those things that I went through my notes. I was like, oh yeah, I remember how bad she was. And then I can just let go of this.
I think that, yeah, the attitude matters. I felt so much more joy learning from teachers that actually loved what they were teaching. I remember I had my U.S. history teacher was a young guy. And I think that he brought a lot of like newer methodologies from when he was in college learning teaching. And he was great. He was just a little bit more approachable than some of the older teachers. He was a little bit more understandable of some of the younger generation. It helped a lot. It was fresh blood, but also he loved U.S. history. He loved teaching it. I know my world history teacher too. She was fantastic. She loved world history. I just, all those classes I got really good grades in, and the grades that I got the worst, or the classes I got the worst grades in, or even flunked out of, like chemistry, was because I hated the teacher, and the teacher hated me. So it was a mutual dislike. I wasn't the greatest kid, let's be honest, but at the same time too, it was weird because they couldn't say that I was a bad student because I was getting like A's in some classes and F's in others. I just didn't like some teachers. And if I didn't like the teacher, I didn't want to be around them and I didn't want to learn from them. I kind of still feel a little bit like that.
So, let me explain what our classes were like. This was a calculus class. I remember we learned things like centroid and double integration and all that stuff. She taught as quickly as possible. She would come in, she'd plop down her stuff, her transparencies on an overhead projector, and she'd just start talking. If people were making noise, she didn't care. If that meant you were sitting in the back and you couldn't hear, she didn't care. She just started talking. By the way, if you asked questions, too many. You could ask a couple questions in a class. If you asked more than that, not just one person. If anyone in the class asked more than one or two questions total, she would get angry at us for asking questions, and you're interrupting my lesson plan. Stop asking questions. And she just
Jesus Christ, dude, that's like, what are you even teaching at that point? Because it's like, if you're just teaching to somebody who has an understanding, if you're teaching and people understand it, that's not really where the friction of knowledge gaining comes in. It is the questions, right? Because somebody doesn't understand something, and if they don't understand something, they cannot learn. So that's kind of, again, that harkens back to me with this Mr. Purdy, where he would sometimes spend the entire class just going over questions that people had, an hour-long class going over questions that people had on the previous homework, which would indicate to him that maybe he needs to go back and teach those things more. And so the next day he would spend going over again until the entire class was moving forward on that method. This was a catch-up class in math, to be fair. So this was kind of, you could argue that maybe this was kind of his responsibility, was to help catch kids up who were falling behind. But at the same time, I felt more like I learned way more about math and practiced way more in his class than any other math class I had taken. Never had a catch-up class. I don't know. I felt kind of bad too, because I used to be ahead 2 years in math and ahead 1 year in reading or in English, right, and whatever. And I fell behind in both, actually. And I had to take catch-up classes. The funny thing is, with English, I remember that I had to take a catch-up class with reading, again, because I didn't like the teacher, so I failed out of that class. And the teacher that I got instead, Mr. Barton, I think his name was just really great. He was really funny. I goofed off in his class, and I don't think he liked it that much. But also, he was just a good teacher, and he was really fun to be around. I willingly took his catch-up class again the next year instead of going to the class that I should have gone to, just because I liked him more. So, I don't know. I'm a weird kid. I was a weird fucking kid. Probably deserved to flunk out.
keep going. She would frequently give us pop quizzes. No, the quizzes you didn't know were coming. And so the only tests that were scheduled was a midterm and a final. But she would randomly do pop quizzes throughout. This was a 15-week semester. This, you might come in, I think it was 2 days a week, maybe 3 days. So you never knew what was going to happen. You'd come in, boom. She'd come in, put up a transparency, and then go, booyah, pop quiz. Let me describe one of the pop quizzes I took.
Yeah.
You had to do something to come up with what was called a Taylor series expansion. Taylor series is a bunch of terms like, 1/2 plus 1/3 plus 1/4. And then you just say plus ... to show that went on forever. The Taylor series expansion just continued like that 1/n forever. I got my test back and I had a 7 out of 10. There was a -3. But my Taylor series was perfect. So I went to her office hours and I said, I don't understand why I lost 3 points. She pointed to the end of my Taylor series where I'd written plus ... And she said, there should be 3 dots there. You don't have 3 dots, -3.
Fuck her. Fuck her, dude. Those are the I'm telling, those are the kinds of teachers I immediately, if that happened, I'm done. I'm out. I'm done with that class. You clearly don't give a shit. You could have just drawn it there and said, don't forget that 3rd dot, because, maybe something like that is important, right? Maybe you have just forgetting one thing like that does not mean that you got it incorrect. It just means, oh, you forgot it. Mistakes happen. I feel so pissed off for Tim for that. Maybe your pen ran out of ink, but it's like, it's not even like an English or like a writing test, right? Where you forget like an apostrophe or you have incorrect grammar, where you might take 1 or 2 points off of the 100 score. Fair enough, right? But this is something so trivial that if it actually matters to how you write it, I would just pen that in and say, hey, don't forget that 3rd dot. and not take any points off. You won't always have a large language model in your pocket. Kids these days are cooked, dude, with LOMs.
And I went, well, I have 2 dots. Shouldn't it just be -1? And she goes, you should have 3 dots, -3. And I said, it's only a 10-point test. You took me, and I got the right answer. You took me from a perfect to a 70, which is a C minus.
To a C,
She
yep.
said you did not have the correct answer. Your answer was incorrect.
Yeah,
Your
if
answer.
people don't know, oddly enough, 69 is the failing. I don't know why, but 69 is the failing number for US. So a 70 is right above that. Or no, I'm wrong. I'm wrong about that. 69 is where D starts, right? And then hold on. US grades 100. Academic grading. Where's the number system? Here we go. 60 to 69 is D. F is up to 59%. So if you have 69, you get the D. Think of that what you will.
It was not a Taylor series. You get a C minus. I won't discuss it. And I'm like, whoa. Okay. Later, the midterm exam did not go well. Lots of people scored really badly, including me. She then announced that she was going to grade our notes. And at the end of class that day, she said, hand me your notebook.
Tim, I think we might have had the same teacher, but like in different universes. That this was engineering teacher. I think your engineering teacher was my chemistry they sound like just the most unlikable, unlovable, annoying, worst female teacher. And female isn't a problem, but it's just the fact that they are both female is kind of funny here in this case. So it sounds like we had the exact same teachers, because they also, I feel like it's coming. He's going to say she graded my notes and didn't like the way that I took my notes.
You will get it back at the next class.
I know it.
She took our notebooks home and returned them at the next class, and we were graded on those notes. Were we graded on the content? No. She also graded on
the
penmanship.
note. Yep.
So
yep.
I think I got a D or an F because I have bad handwriting. Was my content good? Yep. I wrote down everything she said. I had diagrams, labels.
It's so stupid. Your notes are for you. It doesn't matter if other people can read your notes. My notes are for me. As long as I can read it and understand the content and figure out how A leads to B leads to C, that's all that matters. You shouldn't grade someone's ability to take notes. Let them take notes and see if it matches up with the knowledge that they've obtained. God damn it, that's so frustrating. Tim, I want to give you a hug. I know what this feels like. My notes were for the teacher.
But my penmanship was bad. So, fast forward near the end of the semester, I'm going in to this final with a D. I'm going to get a D in math. I've never gotten anything but an A in math. I called home, told my mom, oh my God, I'm failing a school class. I shouldn't be at university. I'm horrible. I need to get out of here. And my
what did your mom say?
Talked me down and said, hey, there's adjustments you're going to have to make. This isn't high school anymore.
Good mom. Good mom. And you know what? My mom, look, how should I word this? I could kill somebody tomorrow, and my mom would probably come to my defense. I think a lot of moms would do this. Now, it doesn't mean that she approves of the things that I did, but she was always there to protect me. She was always there for me. And similarly to this teacher case, my chemistry teacher, when these sorts of things happened, if you killed your mom, she wouldn't come to your phone. Yeah, maybe in that case you would. Fair enough too, by the way, right? But what I just mean is that, in the case of this geometry or this chemistry teacher, when this stuff happened and she saw that my notes were being graded poorly because it wasn't in the way that this teacher wanted, my mom was also livid. But she kind of knew that I was a troubled child. I had problems in school, and she just wanted to make sure that I was learning. But we watched a lot of like educational stuff at home too, and she would teach stuff as well. So, it was supplemented at home. But I learned a lot more, I think, from watching like Discovery Channel and Animal Planet, and just engaging in things that made me curious and having parents that helped to satisfy that curiosity more than teachers would. You had a teacher throw a textbook at you. I had some. I don't know if I had one teacher push me up against lockers in anger. I deserved it. Um, my dad wasn't happy. And fair enough, right? If I was in my dad's place, I don't care what the hell my dad did or what the hell my kid did. You do not lay a hand on my child, regardless. So she was in the right. I can recognize that now, but also I kind of agree with my dad. It's like there's some boundaries you don't cross. Let the parents discipline the kid if the kid's being an asshole, and I was being an asshole. I learned more in my first year out of school with access to the internet than I did in 11 years of school. I think I was always the kid. I don't know if any of you are the same, but I was always the kid that when something piqued my curiosity, I would deep dive into it, and I still am like this. But if something doesn't pique my curiosity, if I don't feel interested in learning about it, I just don't give a shit. I've heard it's a sign of like ADHD or something or ADD, but I've never been diagnosed. I don't know. I always like things too. I always like building. Like we had I don't know, maybe some of you would know this, but maybe not. There were Lincoln logs. There were these, so you had like little logs that you could build stuff with. Those were a lot of fun. I love Legos as well, and those little like electronic kits for kids. There were like these snap ones, like these. I love these as a kid. My dad is, an electrical engineer, and so these were very good for me, and they were fun when he played these with us. I don't know. I was always interested in like systems, things, mechanics, how things worked. I would take apart. I would buy cheap electronics at like sales and stuff, and I would take them apart just to see how they worked. So yeah, I don't know. I was a weird kid. Same here, I guess. You were always taking apart stuff as a kid. Yeah, I would never put it back together either. I'd just be like, ooh, I don't know how to put this back together, but it was really fun taking apart.
Something else that's important right here is at this point, by after that getting that D on the midterm,
Yeah.
and going into the final with D, for probably the last half of that semester, I was only studying this one math class. My other classes, I would do the homework as quickly as possible, and then I'd jump back into math. I wasn't studying. I wasn't doing any of the reading assignments. I was all math. So sidebar one, I got pulled in before the final exam on physics by the physics teacher, who, by the way, was not only the dean of the department, but was one of the professors who handled the Rodman Scholar Program. So that physics class was populated by entirely Rodman scholars.
Okay.
And he said, I'm just curious, Mr. Cain. I remember admitting you to the Rodman Scholar Program. I remember your transcript, and you had all A's in physics and all your science classes and all your math classes. Why are you getting a C minus in my physics class? I explained the situation to him that I was having in that math class, and I also told him that I had stopped studying physics 8 weeks before. And he said, what do you mean by that? And I said, I come to your class, I pay attention, I take notes, but I have no time to look at anything. And all the tests you take, I just try to remember what you said.
To be fair, I think that that's a really important point that a lot of teachers don't think about, is that they're not the only ones giving homework to kids. And I had a lot of classes that would give a lot of homework, and I would spend most of my time thinking about that work instead of others. And it does come at a detriment to the time that I would spend on other classes' homework and thinking. And I don't think that's very right either. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just me because every kid is different. Every kid learns in a different way, and teachers have to adapt to that. And I think that's a very difficult job. I would not want that job. But I just don't think giving kids a whole bunch of homework is the right way to ensure that they are learning. I don't know. Here's a good example. I don't know if this is the right way to look at it, but we had these giant math books that my parents would buy because in the U.S. you have a lot of driving. My mom and my dad would drive us around a lot of places. My mom had a lot of things to do. She was a stay-at-home mom, so she would buy these sorts of like these workbooks for kids that are just filled with honestly what you would describe as homework. But me and my brother loved doing these. They were fun. They were like puzzles, and we could take them at our own pace. These were really enjoyable. So it's not that I hated homework, but that maybe it's the way that the homework is being presented, or the way that you have to go to school for 7, 8 hours a day, and then you're expected to do even more work when you come home. I think that's in some cases, I think just kids are being overworked with homework and aren't really being taught to critically think. And I don't know, it's like education is maybe just being done in backwards in schools. At least it kind of felt that way for me, at least in hindsight, right? Like rather than pushing a whole bunch of homework, why don't you just try to teach kids during the 1 hour that you have them every weekday, 5 hours a week? That's a lot of time to teach, 5 hours a week, as opposed to, blah, 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 talk, 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 don't ask questions, don't just do the things that are assigned in your workbook. And if you don't understand, that's your fault. You're falling behind. Bad kid, suck a dick, go, do remedial class or do, homeschooling or shit afterwards. I don't know. I just don't think that. I think that kids kind of do get overworked in school with going to school for 6, 7 hours a day or whatever it is, and then coming home and having to do a shit ton of homework. That's not how adult life is. And they're kids. I mean, come on. You only have one chance being a child, and nobody wants to spend it doing a whole bunch of bullshit.
And I said, if you look at my latest test that I only did okay on, there was a formula I couldn't remember, so I derived it from first principles like you did in the lecture. And he actually pulled my test out and looked at it, and he goes, oh my God, here it is in the sidebar. You re-derived that. And I said, yeah. And he said, oh, but you made a mistake in the derivation, so you got the wrong answer. And I'm like, yep. So he asked what math class this was, and I told him the class and the name of the teacher, and he just nodded, knowing.
He knew. He's like, oh, it all makes sense now. Yep, that's why. Part of the problem is education has been turned into an 8-hour day thing to get kids used to the 9 to 5 and accommodate their parents who are working during the day. Real problem is society being structured to believe that 9 to 5 is normal. I mean, I kind of agree with that. I'm not a fan of both parents having to work to make a living, and I don't know if there's a way to fix that. I think there's a lot of positives to more people in the workforce, of course, but I also would never exchange me growing up with a stay-at-home mom for anything. Looking back at it, that was one of the greatest things that I could have had as a kid ever. Sure, I wish that I had my dad around for that time too, but he was working his ass off, losing years of his life to make sure that he provided for my mom, me, and my brother. That's kind of, I think any man is going to look in the mirror and say, well, that's a man's duty. And, I can kind of agree with that. But, nowadays it's like, well, the mom and dad have to work. They have to provide for the kids, and the kids just, I don't know, are either forced to be independent a little bit too early, or maybe aren't being taught things at home that they could be taught. My mom was spending time at home with me and my brother doing what? Arts and crafts, making things, visiting places, going to the zoo, going to different gardens, just being exposed to all sorts of life. And when my dad had time, I was in Boy Scouts. I was going on camping trips. I was learning metalworking and woodworking and, survival tips, first aid, everything. I think that this had a clearly beneficial, this had a beneficial outcome on my life and my understanding of the world and my ability to be a bit more adaptive or adaptable, I think is the better word for here. And I see a lot of kids that just, they don't know how to do a load of clothes. They don't know how to do this or that or whatever. And it just seems like they've been failed at some point or at multiple points in their education. And it's not their fault. It's not the kid's fault in many cases. Sometimes it's just that they're not being taught the things that they're supposed to be. Suppressed real wages is part of the reason. Well, yeah. You were raised by your mom by herself, basically, while she worked 12-hour shifts at a factory to take care of the three of us. Dude, shout out to moms. Happy Fat Thursday, but also shout out to moms.
And I told him the class and the name of the teacher, and he just nodded knowingly. And I said, "Oh, you know her?"
Shout out. Hold on. Shout out to inseminated persons. I'm sorry. I'm going to do a callback. If you're watching on YouTube, you're going to think that I'm crazy. But my home state of Wisconsin wanted to change official terminology from woman to inseminated persons. So I have to do a callback to that. What a fucking stupid thing.
And he was, yes. Second sidebar. The next year, I was in a Rodman-only project class,
Yeah.
which was real interesting to teach how to work in teams. The teacher asked what we thought of the class. We were talking about the pros and cons of working in teams and, you know, how it was sometimes really difficult when somebody on the team didn't do as much by the other team members. He then asked, would we want a class like that again? And we were all like, yeah, we think we would. And then he said, would you do a Rodman? If you were being asked to join the Rodman Scholar Program again, would you do it? Everybody in the class raised their hand except me. So he turned to me and said, Mr. Cain, I'm curious why you didn't raise your hand. He goes, I'm not mad. I'm just curious what it is. And I told him about the other scholar classes I had. And I said, they're all exactly the same as the non-scholar classes, except I'm in with the other scholars. And since a lot of them were graded on curves, it looks like I'm doing worse, even though I'm doing the same as I always did. And I probably would have gotten an A in those classes, but I'm getting B's and C's in this one.
You know, that's a fair point. When you're graded on a curve, you could literally have a worse GPA than people taking the regular classes just because you're being graded on a harsher curve. I think that's kind of ridiculous. I mean, especially when Tim was coming up into the industry, your GPA and your college degree had a really big impact on how people saw you. And now you're just screwed over because you're doing the same work as good as you used to, but you're being graded harsher. And now, I mean, how do you explain that to an employer? Oh, my GPA is bad because I was graded more harshly than other kids. I mean, who's going to believe that? I mean, even if it is true in this, which it is in this case, it's kind of bullshit.
So I said, so here's the Rodman Scholar. It has no financial aid. The classes are harder and I'm doing more work, and my evaluations are worse.
Why am I here?
Let's turn the question around. Why would you think I should do this?
Yeah, especially with no financial benefit. Like, why am I doing this? Just take me out of this.
What special thing do you think I'm getting out of this other than kind of feeling bad about myself a lot? And he was like, that's an interesting take on it. So let's fast forward to how the class ended, which isn't even the epilogue. So final exam day came in that math class. Keep in mind, almost half the class was going into this with D's or F's. So the professor said, look, if your grade on the final exam is better than the grade you have going into it, you're just going to get that. I found out later, I don't think she didn't want to do this. She was kind of told by the dean, we can't believe you can't fail half this class.
Yeah, I mean, even if he... It's just not, at a certain point, it's just not fair. You know, I can understand being graded on a curve, you're being graded a bit harsher, but the things he was being graded for, at least, you know, from his perspective that he's shown here, are really just not legitimate and wouldn't have a big impact in an actual workplace. I'm sorry, but if you make a small mistake on like a note or an email in a workplace, nobody gives a shit, and you have a chance to fix it to alleviate the problem. It's not like you go through life and, you know, I write an email and I miss a period and somebody's like, you do not get this job because you missed the period on this email. It's just, nobody cares. Let's say, oh, you missed a period, whatever. Who cares? But in school, you get graded harshly for this. And in his case, he gets a 7 out of 10 on an assignment on a pop quiz because he missed 1 dot on a math test. That's just, at that point, the grade is not fair.
Told by the dean, we can't believe you can't fail half this class. I got an A on the exam. I studied for it.
Nice.
I started studying 2 weeks before that final exam. I memorized pages of formulas. I memorized pages out of the book. I got an A. When I went to go pick it up,
I would have cheated. Okay, raise your hand. How many of you cheated in tests? Come on, let's be honest. I cheated in a lot of my tests. Did you check out Blast? We didn't get to Casper, but we can check it out on Monday. I forgot to do that. I hate cheating on tests. Dude, I cheated on a lot of tests. I was never very good with memorizing things.
up from the TA, because you go get your grade and you could pick it up. The TA said, "Oh, she wants to see you." So I went to see her. She was not happy. She said, "Mr. Cain, I don't think you deserve this. I'm not happy with your performance or your attitude.
What a bitch.
I just wanted you to know." And I said, "Well, that's great. I'd like you to know that you're the worst teacher I ever had. Your technique is terrible."
Wait, no, there's no way he actually said that. There's no way, dude. Giga Chad, Tim Kaine, if he said that, because that's something that I would say. And everybody in my life, my parents, my family, extended family, my friends, they would all say, "Do not say this thing. It will ruin your life." And I will say that thing. In fact, them telling me not to only makes me kind of want to do it more. That's kind of how impulsive I am sometimes.
With your performance or your attitude. I just wanted you to know. And I said, "Well, that's great. I'd like you to know that you're the worst teacher I ever had. Your technique is terrible. Your attitude is terrible. You've made me go from feeling a joy about math to hating math. And that's all on you." And she said, "Well, do you think I care about that?" And I said, "I don't care."
Do you think I care about not being a good teacher? As a teacher, huh? Do you think that I care about that? What a bitch. I'm sorry, what a bitch. She deserves it. Label, 5-letter word, put on there.
I'm not going to think about you anymore. If I see you in the hallway, I'm just going to look the other way. And I'm going to be here the next 4 years. So you're going to see me walk right by you in the hallways. I'm just going to look the other way because I don't care to interact with you or see you ever again. And she got really angry. And I said, "Now, are you going to break your promise? I got an A on your final. I expect to see an A on my transcript." And she got all tight-lipped. This is the epilogue.
Holy shit,
4
dude.
years later, I was the editor.
Holy shit, I love that. I love that. I had a few teachers like that across high school and university. I'm sorry. This is one of the reasons why I hate unions, and that I think it's called like a mafia mentality where they protect you. They will protect their own no matter what. I think that bad teachers sometimes, bad cops, people in the game industry also have this where it's like, "Oh, we have to protect them. Why are you celebrating people losing their jobs?" Well, if their job was to make a game fun and they failed at making it fun, are they very good at their job? Why should I be protecting people that aren't good? "Oh, they're a developer, or you shouldn't, you should protect them even though they had a bad take about gamers." No, I'm not going to protect them. If they shit on gamers, they are no friend of mine, because when I go home today, I'm going to go play games after I make chili. But then I'm going to go play games. I don't want to be treated that way when I go home and I play the games that I love. I'm not going to protect these people. I'm getting fired up. I like workers' representation in upper level of management, but I hate the idea of union, especially if union is bigger than company. I think unions are needed in some cases, but they also often have way too much power. And teachers' unions are some of the worst. They will protect teachers that do horrible things, that are horrible teachers, simply because they're part of the union. They will just shuffle them over to another school so that they can dump their bullshit on a whole bunch of new kids. I'm sorry, but they should lose their job. If you're not a good teacher, you should not be around kids. You should not be teaching kids. Kids are very impressionable. This is the one time in their life where statistically, biologically, they absorb knowledge better than they will when they're older. And if you fuck that up, you are a bad teacher and you should not be teaching. Sorry, Tim. I'm getting fired up. You're firing me up. I know I can't fire you up because you're a video, but we're good. This is a good headspace to be in. Fuck teachers like this.
The engineering school paper, and I did an editorial about something I heard that the UVA's e-school let in about twice as many students as they planned to graduate.
He's watching the stream. I don't know if he is.
The way they got rid of them was the first 2 years they threw really difficult classes at them and encouraged people who weren't doing well to consider transferring into the College of Arts and Sciences. And I know people who did that. I know someone who went from computer science to getting a math degree, which was in the Arts and Sciences school. And I read an editorial about that, and I mentioned that math teacher my first year and how she had to have been part of that program, how I really did not like her, and she made me lose my joy of math. He asked me not to publish it, this dean of the engineering school.
Okay, but okay, he asked you not to publish it. I can understand that. I can understand from his perspective why he would ask you not to do that. Teachers unions. Um, I think that's the only reason, because I would see, number one, traditionally in the U.S., I don't know if it's the same in Europe, but I would imagine it, that college papers are generally, they can post some pretty controversial stuff. You know, you have a lot of like journalist majors who take charge of this, and they will write some exposés on the school. And traditionally, you have a lot of things get exposed at schools that were bad from college papers. You know, and it's freedom of the press, right? There's a lot of freedoms for the press in the U.S. There's shield laws to protect people who write things. And I can see why the dean wouldn't want him to write this, but also I hope that I hear that Tim did manage to get it and that it wasn't forced out of it. He's recording, and later he will post the video of him watching you watch him, and then you will watch that. That's true. I will do that.
And I said, "You're not even, unless you order me not to do it." And he goes, "I'm not going to do that." But he goes, "I don't think this is a good thing to do. It makes my life harder."
Fair enough.
By the way, I heard that later from people above me, how I was making their life harder.
By the way, you know, I look, I'll say this. I think the dean, fair, right? It will make his life harder, because I would imagine that she's in the union and they can't fire her. She's got tenure, and that's going to, you know, if he allows this, she will know that he allowed it, and then that's going to cause some drama between them. But at the same time, I am 100% in agreement with Tim writing this. People need to know. The parents deserve to know. You know, other kids who might have this teacher deserve to know. If a teacher's bad, I don't see why they should be protected. It's that exactly the mob mentality, the mafia mentality, the omerta. It's a whole bunch of this bullshit. Stop protecting people who are bad just because they do the same thing that you do.
When actually what it was is I was pointing out things that I don't think they were doing well, and they didn't want to hear it. And they would say, "Well, you're just making my life harder."
You're paying for the school. You have a right to say bad things about the teachers at the school. I mean, you're paying a lot, and nowadays it's even more, because they're, you know, these colleges are a whole bunch of expensive scams in a lot of cases. You have a right to say that this teacher does not deserve to be there. I'm sorry, that's my belief. Fuck the unions.
You know what? You make my life harder every day.
Yeah.
So, by the way, the editorial got published. Tons of people agreed, pointing out other teachers that they thought were doing the same thing. And let's just say that something came out where this teacher turned out to not be a tenured professor, but she was salaried or something. She was in a position that could be removed.
Yeah.
And apparently that's what they apparently did use her class for this.
Yep.
So
there it is.
I hope I don't come across as sounding as bitter, because this was something that I learned a lot of things from this. Sometimes, like I've said, you can learn from failure. Let me tell you some of the lessons I learned from this. First of all, don't let one bad experience stop you. I didn't quit the university.
True too.
I didn't quit my degree. Other people did. I didn't do that. I basically was like, look, I had 6 classes that semester, and this was the only one that was like that. I'm not going to assume everything is going to be this bad going forward, and nothing was. That was the worst class I ever had in engineering school, and it just happened.
Yeah, it's like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's, I think that can be applied to pretty much everything in life, right? You know, oftentimes, this is a weird tangent, but we were talking about it today on stream. Racism. Oftentimes people are racist because they have 1 or 2 bad experiences with somebody of a specific nationality, or, you know, it's culture more than race. But either way, they have 1 or 2 bad experiences. They write everybody of that culture or nationality off, and boom, now you're in this room of racism. And that can happen from all sides. Math university teacher was yelling at us and cursed, and I think he even once threw chalk. This room is no, I'm not this room. You guys, well, I hope you guys aren't racist, but I mean, generally that's kind of how it is, right? That's like tribalism. It's just you have one bad thing, and in order to feel safe and secure and survive, you protect yourself from any other experiences like that. You get into a car crash, you might stop driving, or you might drive a lot safer, and you might feel traumatized, right? So trauma can lead to change, but change is neither good nor bad. It is subjective, and in some cases, I would argue, ethically, being a racist, and probably morally too, is not a good change. Um, but there's other change that is positive. Maybe you shouldn't have driven so fast all the time. Maybe driving safer is the better thing for you and the people around you in society. So that trauma of getting in a car crash when you were driving too fast is your fault, and that's a good change. I'm sorry, Tim. You were talking, and I talked about. I'm sorry, I get off topic.
Everything is going to be this bad going forward, and nothing was. That was the worst class I ever had in engineering school, and it just happened to happen at the very first semester. Also, but don't let one bad experience change you. I tried not to sour my whole university experience. I tried to approach it as, okay, here's something that I really should learn from. Now, years later, when the alumni association was asking me for money, I'm like, I can't in good conscience give you money because you hired multiple teachers like this, and I don't agree with that. So no money for you. However, it did make me realize that if you let a bad experience change you, that will change your experiences from then on. If you approach the world with a bitter mindset, a lot of times you'll get bitter back at you. And then that reinforces, you're like, see how bad the world is? See how bad.
Tim, this is not only relevant for teaching, this is just relevant for life. I mean, it feels like we were talking a lot today about like politics, in our Twitch chat, and how divisive everybody's getting. And that's exactly the reason. It's just, you have the bad experience, it makes you bitter. Then you create bad experiences that make the other side bitter. They create, and it just keeps going back and forth until everybody's pulled to some edge, and it all usually explodes in some nasty. We're all fascists now, yeah. Well, we are all fascists. Just depends on who's looking at you, right? On one side, they may see you as that, and the other side may see you as that too if you're in the center. In politics, so yeah. I agree. I mean, I think Tim just brings up a good point of, you shouldn't find yourself. It's like dating. When you date and you're a kid, let's everybody remember their first love, their first crush, their first date, their first boyfriend or girlfriend, whatever, or furry friend if you're weird like that, and you break up. It's the end of the world. Nothing will get better after this. You might as well just kill yourself. Nothing is good. And then you realize when you get over it, it's like, oh, well, I'm just not going to find somebody who's like that. That person was not good for me. We didn't have enough in common. So I'm going to find something that is, and now has more in common with me. Mr. Saul says, I find myself becoming an incel. I need help. Do you actually find yourself becoming an incel? Or are you just fucking around? Am I going to be the new, the new Andrew Tate or Jordan Peterson? You're serious? Okay. You find yourself becoming an incel. This is a weird divergence for this stream to take. Let me think of what to say. I think that what is it? Do you just like hate? Do you hate women? Do you just not? Have you had a lot of bad experiences with dating girls? What is it? You're becoming the new Andrew Tate. I'm out of here. It was a joke. I hope I'm not. I hope I'm not that crazy. Women are pretty nice. It's just, you don't hate women, but I don't like them either. I'll put it this way: there are women sitting out there right now, your age, who are probably thinking the same thing about men, and you wouldn't want them thinking that way about you. There are also women out there right now who are sitting and wondering where the good guys are. They just want to be treated with respect and kindness, and they want to find somebody who makes them happy. And you probably want that too. And I think that's one of the things to just keep in mind. If you feel yourself becoming an incel, know that there are There are women that think like you, and there are women that just want to be happy like you. Try to surround yourself with the women that are just chill and just want to be happy and have a normal life and have all the nice things that you would want in your life too. Want to find women, you need to invest in yourself. That helps too, yeah. Look, be the kind of person that you would want to date, but as a woman. Look at places where women that you would like are. That's true too. Yeah, a lot of men want to find a girlfriend that plays game and it goes to RPG session and they're looking for them at Tinder or clubs. Yeah, I think that's a good one too. It's like if you want to find the type of girl that, if you're going to, I don't know, clubs, right, to find women, it's a crapshoot. It's like, think about what it would take mentally to go to these clubs. And if that's okay, if that's the type of person that you want to meet, that's where you're going to find them. If you want to, like Kotspur says, if you are looking for people that like to play games and talk about nerdy stuff, fantasy, sci-fi, RPGs, whatever, you should go find women that go to these types of things. But I think that I don't know how old you are, Sir Celsus, but if you feel like you're becoming an incel, definitely take a look at the type of media you're consuming. Are you spending a lot of time on TikTok, on YouTube, on Twitter, on Blue Sky? Who are you surrounding yourself with? You're 30. Okay, I'm 32. I have women that I don't like. I have men that I don't like. How are these social media platforms generating content for you? Scrolling through anime edits. I mean, anime women aren't real. It's I think that if you're consuming a lot of fake women, you might find that the reality of women is not going to match up with the fake women. Now, it's not always the case, but it's an ideal. It's like women who read 50 Shades of Grey, right? Or they read some book about a whole bunch of burly men that make all the right decisions and save people from fires. Most men aren't like that, right? Most men are just like us. They're just kind of random. They have flaws. They have issues. But yeah, hobbies are a great way too, and that way you can bond over something that you both like to do. Like rock climbing is a good one. Women versus men wars are fake. They are. Yep. There's a lot of culture wars that are just purposefully, women are being bombarded with media that men are the worst thing. Men are being bombarded with media that women are the worst thing. And honestly, most people just want to live a happy, stress-free life without any drama. The less that you kind of engage in it, I think the more that you'll start to meet people that also don't want to engage in it. I don't know. I don't know if what I'm saying helps at all, but I can see where you're coming from.
Experiences from then on. If you approach the world with a bitter mindset,
Like,
a lot of times you'll get bitter back at you.
Exactly.
And then that reinforces, you're like, see how bad the world is? See how bad it's treating me? If you start treating people badly, you start getting treated badly in return.
I know some legitimate femcells. I'm not going to name names. I just know some women that all they do when they get together is they talk about how bad men are, and they wonder why they're single. It's the same thing, but for women. It's like no guy wants to hang around a woman that just shits on them all the time and doesn't actually, put any effort into the relationship. Women don't want to hang around guys that just badmouth women all the time. And some do. Some are like masochists, or they're really vulnerable and then they get abused. That's how abusive relationships happen. But most of the time. 10% of men are bad and 10% of women are bad, and 90% of those bad people are in some cultural circle, yeah. Or in same cultural circle. X is so bad. I don't know. I think that most, like X, YouTube, all they do is they feed you content that you engage in. So if you don't engage in those, in the kind of shitty things, you won't get shown those things. My feed on Twitter is just like memes, game dev stuff, nature videos, cat videos, things like that. 90% of what I have on Twitter. I don't see all the bad things that people talk about. Because I just don't engage in it. Catboy videos. Maybe for you, Serene.
And a lot of you probably don't think you're doing it, but if you approach
But I will
people,
I'll tell you what, Sir South. If you really are like feeling like incelish, you can at least be safe here because I'm not going to ban you for that. I think you might get banned in some other chats. I don't believe in excluding people from groups simply because they have alternate views or they're going down a hole that may not be very healthy for them. So if you want to hang out, you can do it here.
And you're pessimistic or untrusting or just bitter, you're going to get that back. And then you're going to think it justifies your behavior, where in fact, it's your behavior that's causing it. Here's another lesson I learned. A little bit of extra work from me, I could have avoided this entire experience. If I had only gotten a 5 on my AP calculus test, I would never have encountered that teacher. I would never have taken that class. I would have skipped the entire
Butterfly
first
effect.
year, and I never would have known.
Yep.
I mean, I probably would have had a much happier engineering school experience.
I would say maybe happier, but I think that a lot of times the trauma shapes you in positive ways, right? I think you can come out of trauma, like we mentioned, you can come out of trauma and change in a positive or negative way. Some people will get into, I mean, this is relevant to the topic we had. Some people will have a bad experience with a male or female, and that will traumatize them, and then they will come out of that thinking that all men or all women are bad, and that shapes their life in what I would say is a negative way. But in other cases, having this traumatic experience with his teacher, I think made him a better person. It made him realize exactly how he shouldn't react and be if he wants to be a good teacher himself. I had a similar experience with game dev where I had a horrible, egotistical, asshole project leader, and I honestly saw a bit of my own. I saw a bit of my own actions, especially in years prior, in the way that he was acting. And that forced me to the other side. I was like, oh shit, so this is how it looks to other people when I act this way, and this is how people think of me when I act this way. No wonder I've been pushing people away. Okay, I'm gonna do the opposite thing now.
For a little more work early on would have saved me a lot of heartache later. This is a really important lesson. I also, this was probably the first lesson I had that people in authority will sometimes act badly. Not just the teacher, but that dean. It's because they've got a lot of pressure on them coming in on from other things. But they can act badly. So sometimes they just do.
Yeah, there can be the blindness. There can also just be the willingness to continue with the habitual, and you can choose to not engage with controversy or choose not to be, what's the word here, a confrontational, because it will upset the status quo. I know a lot of people in game dev right now that will just not quit a bad job simply because they don't want to upset the status quo. And they have different reasons. Some of them are valid. Other times I don't think they're very valid, but it's not my life, so it's not my decision to make. But a lot of people are just non-confrontational and want to avoid conflict, and therefore will not try to make a bad situation better.
This isn't an excuse, it's just an explanation. Sometimes people are under tremendous pressures you don't know about.
Yep.
They act badly. It's not an excuse, it's an explanation for why they act that way.
Yeah, and there is a very big difference, I think, between explanation and excuse. You can, I think there's a common misconception, oh, you're coming up with excuses. You're just trying to excuse bad behavior. Well, if I'm telling you that, I had this bad behavior because this other thing in my life traumatized me and it made me very paranoid, and that's the way I acted, I'm not excusing the way that I acted when I was very paranoid. I'm just explaining how what I was in that moment and how I got to be there. And of course, I'm going to try to avoid that in the future. And people oftentimes will take that one bad excuse and just write off a person completely. Oh, this person was really, really, rude and combative for a month, and therefore they are a rude and combative person, and they will just ignore the fact that maybe that person was going through a divorce or, had a stressful, maybe their partner had a stressful surgery that was being, coming up that could have, ended in, something really bad. So, yeah, sometimes people they're adults. Everybody's going through something. I don't think that it's even, sometimes everybody is going through something that you don't know. I think all the time, every single person in the world is going through something that you don't know and probably can't empathize with. And they're just trying to live their life as best as possible in the moment. And you have to kind of think about that, especially in times where the emotions are the spiciest and the tension is the worst.
And then the last
That's
thing I want to
empathy.
say is I wonder sometimes if this is the origin of my note taking. You know, when I got graded badly on my notes, I did try to take better notes, and I took better notes from then on. So sometimes I wonder, is that math class the origin of my note taking, my better note taking, my detailed note taking?
Could be.
Maybe. I don't know. But anyway, at least I can look back on that experience and go, I learned a lot of good things from it. So there's that.
Yeah. There's been a couple of not so great games that I've worked on, and some of them that didn't even release, that I look back on and say, you know what, I may not have learned how to make a good game. I learned a lot of ways how not to make a good game, though. I learned a lot of ways to how to make a bad game. So, it would have been beneficial if we had made a good game, but I also learned a lot from those experiences too. So this was a fantastic video. It gave us a lot to talk about. Please, guys, go give this a thumbs up, and go give Tim a subscription. This was a fantastic video for us to watch. If you're watching on YouTube too, hope you enjoyed that one, and I will catch you on the next one, YouTube. Bye-bye.